This is Right to Life Radio. And now, here's your host, John Gerardi.
The Supreme Court deals an incredibly disappointing blow to our efforts to regulate the abortion pill. In an extremely disappointing outcome, a 9-0 decision, the Supreme Court rules that basically the FDA's initial approval of the abortion pill and its subsequent regulations of the abortion pill to make it more and more readily accessible, those stand. The court ruled on standing grounds, not on the substance. We'll explain what all of that means. John Gerardi here from Right to Life Central California. Jonathan Keller right here also from California Family Council. Disappointing outcome, certainly, Jonathan.
Yeah, I think this is not entirely unsurprising.
Well, I think the standing argument was always weak with this case. And I even remember reading the initial filing, some of the initial decisions at the district court level and the circuit court level, and basically looking at those and the arguments about standing. I sort of, that seems kind of attenuated. So let me explain what standing is for those who know. So the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 basically against the FDA. So let me give this whole landscape. Okay. In the year 2000, the FDA, the Food and Drug...
In the year 2000,
the distant future, the Food and Drug Administration approved the abortion pill, mifepristone. This is a drug to terminate a pregnancy up to 10 weeks into the pregnancy. So it cuts off the baby from his food supply. Baby and placenta detach from the uterine wall. The baby dies. The woman then takes a second drug called misoprostol. So it's mifepristone, then misoprostol, and the baby is expelled from the woman's body. The FDA gave its approval to this in the year 2000 through an expedited approval process, a quicker approval process, which is reserved, according to the law that governs the FDA in this regard, for drugs that treat serious illnesses. Well, some people noticed pregnancy is not a serious illness. Abortion is not a treatment for any kind of serious illness. In 2016, the FDA updated its regulations of the abortion pill. Basically, it loosened a lot of the safety restrictions that were placed around the abortion pill. It went from basically you had to have an appointment beforehand, an appointment to actually get the drug, and a follow-up appointment. They eliminated the 3 visits. You now only need 1 visit to get the abortion pill. Also, in 2016, that round of regulations under Barack Obama's FDA, the abortion pill, basically they stopped collecting adverse health and safety data about the abortion pill, information about adverse outcomes other than deaths. So we're kind of flying blind as far as the safety of the abortion pill under this new regime of relaxed regulations. In 2021, President Biden further loosened restrictions on the abortion pill to allow the abortion pill to be prescribed just through a telemedicine visit. So a patient just having a telemedicine visit with a nurse practitioner, no in-person exam, no in-person ultrasound to confirm gestational age, and as part of this, the Biden administration allowed for the abortion pill to be shipped to patients directly in the mail or to be picked up at major American pharmacies rather than be picked up in a clinical setting, which had been the regulations on the abortion pill before. Now, one of the things I think people don't understand about the Supreme Court is that the Supreme Court doesn't just opine on really important issues that they sort of find interesting.
At least not when you're a conservative.
Well, no. In any case, what the Supreme Court is doing is they are ruling on actual lawsuits.
Right.
It's an actual lawsuit that has actual parties that has been appealed up to them.
And John, I guess I should clarify, because there's this whole thing, as a non-attorney, I did not realize this, but there's this whole thing that there's a podcast that I even occasionally listen to that is called Advisory Opinions. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that, generally speaking, most courts try to refrain from offering advisory opinions, but especially the Supreme Court.
Right. So
They're
an
not
advisory
just-
opinion is just there's no actual lawsuit or actual controversy, and you're just giving your opinion on some legal question. That's not how the American legal system is supposed to work.
Right.
Other
you
countries
can do that if you're a president in a speech. You can do that if you're a legislator. But the court is supposed to adjudicate cases.
Right. And other countries' legal systems allow for some of that, but not the United States. Okay. So basically, there was this thought that the FDA's various approvals and deregulations of the abortion pill violated its own rules, violated law governing the FDA, governing federal administrative agencies. And the idea was, well, let's challenge this through a lawsuit. So a group of doctors in Texas gathered together under this organization called the Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine, and they filed a lawsuit in Texas to challenge the FDA's various approvals of the abortion pill. Now, they did so in a very specific part of Texas where there's only one federal judge, and he's a very, very conservative Trump appointee, and he resides within the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is maybe the most conservative of all the circuit courts. So there's a little bit of forum shopping. And the problem was, and this is the thing that the Supreme Court ruled on, is, yeah, you're a bunch of doctors. You maybe take care of patients who have adverse outcomes from this drug. You might be impacted by it in some ways, but it doesn't affect you enough to give you standing to file a lawsuit, basically.
Right.
And standing, it was the problem. So the Supreme Court said 9-0, you doctors in Texas who are challenging the FDA's regulation here, you don't have standing to file this lawsuit. And standing is a sort of fundamental principle in American law. I always use this example. Jonathan's
Yes.
house must be really tired. His house must be really tired of this. If someone crashes a car into Jonathan's house, I would feel really bad for Jonathan. I would feel upset. I would
Not as upset as me, but
yeah. But that's the problem is, as upset as I would feel, I can't sue the guy who crashed the car. Jonathan has to sue the guy.
Exactly.
Jonathan is the one who has standing. Jonathan and his wife, Julia, they're the ones who have standing. They are the ones who actually suffered the harm, either physical harm or economic harm. And you also have to show basically a close enough chain of causation in order to have standing to sue. So let's say the person who crashed his car into your house, Jonathan, let's say he was drunk.
Right.
You would have standing to sue that guy. You probably wouldn't have standing, though, to sue Anheuser-Busch.
Correct.
Even, he drank, Your Honor, he drank 20 beers. He drank 20 Bud Lights before he got in that car and crashed it. I need to sue, Bud Light, Anheuser-Busch caused this injury to my house. Well, no. The chain of causality, it's too far attenuated. It's too far separation between Anheuser-Busch's actions creating a product that has certain known side effects if you use it out of moderation. They're not going to be held legally responsible for this guy crashing his car into your house.
Right.
Right. So I think the way the Supreme Court was ruling is, look, the FDA approves drugs all the time that have all kinds of side effects that doctors have to take care of. If a group of doctors can challenge the FDA for any regulatory decision it makes because it impacts them because they have to take care of people with side effects from that, well, then the FDA would have nothing but lawsuits all day, every day from any doctor anywhere could sue the FDA all the time for any regulatory decision it ever made.
And John, that's something that I thought, I did not read the entire opinion, but I saw a couple of the key quotes from Justice Kavanaugh, who wrote this unanimous opinion.
Right.
And I thought, as much as we as pro-lifers hate the outcome of this decision, in so much as that it allows for abortion pills to still be dispensed like candy, practically.
Right. And we'll talk about kind of the disastrous, how disastrous the abortion pill
Yes.
has been, which I think it has been a complete disaster.
But I will say this: as much as we hate the outcome of the decision in terms of what effect it will allow abortion pills to continue to have, I do think that some of the stuff that Kavanaugh was saying in his opinion, I mean, it is 9-0, which yes, it means on the one hand to get to get the 4 liberal justices. The 3 liberal justices on the court, Ketanji Brown Jackson, Elena Kagan, and Sonia Sotomayor. Obviously, to get them to sign on to a unanimous opinion, of course, it's probably not going to be as conservative as the rest of us would want it to be. But in another sense, there was something very fundamentally conservative about this opinion because, as we've seen on the other side of things, this is what I think Kavanaugh was pointing out. Well, look, you could essentially have, given our current state of society right now, you could have a group of doctors decide that they were going to try to challenge almost any law on almost any grounds. And some of the examples I heard people use for this in another podcast I was listening to, they said, look, you could have a group of emergency room physicians say, hey, we are challenging we're challenging firearm laws because I'm an emergency room doctor, and one time I had to treat a gunshot victim. And by allowing proliferation, quote unquote, of AR-15s, you're increasing the likelihood that I'm going to have to treat someone for a mass shooting.
Right, exactly.
By keeping the speed limit high, you're saying that the car accidents I'm going to have to treat might be worse.
Right. And I guess the court has to sort of have some limiting principle there. Now, when we return, though, I want to kind of go in detail, though, about how disastrous the proliferation of the abortion pill is and my griping thoughts about sort of the unfairness about standing requirements. That is next on the John Gerardi Show. On Right to Life Radio. Excuse me. No, it's Right to Life Radio. That's next on Right to Life Radio. We're back with Right to Life Radio, and we are talking about the Supreme Court's decision last week, 9-0, to keep in place all the FDA's regulations surrounding the abortion pill, and basically ruling that the plaintiffs who filed the lawsuit, a group of pro-life doctors from Texas, that they did not have standing to bring a lawsuit challenging the FDA. Now, I want to kind of explain why this is such a disaster. And I do think the numbers and the reality of how the abortion pill has reshaped the whole landscape of abortion provision in America in a way that, by the way, Jonathan, you and I correctly predicted during the 2020 election cycle.
Yep.
And we identified it as the most important issue in the 2020 election that absolutely nobody was talking about.
I do remember this painfully.
Yeah, that we were correctly predicting that if President Biden got elected and his FDA, which we knew his FDA was probably going to do because all of his science advisors were advocating for this, that allowing the abortion pill to be prescribed without an in-clinic visit and to be shipped through the mail or to be picked up at major pharmacies, that was going to reshape the entire landscape of abortion provision in America.
Right. I hate being right sometimes.
I hate being right, but that's 100% exactly precisely what has happened. So let me explain how. The abortion pill has gone from being certainly not the majority way that abortions were done to it is now 63% of all abortions in America today are done via the abortion pill. And I suspect that number is, I know that number is trending upward. It jumped from like 53% to like 63% in like a year or two. And, you know, when we look at Planned Parenthood Marmonti, so Planned Parenthood Marmonti, I joke, it's our Planned Parenthood. So the Planned Parenthood is kind of divided into different regional organizations. So regional collections of clinics that are sort of one corporation each. And Planned Parenthood Marmonti is the single corporation that runs all the Planned Parenthood clinics in San Jose, the North Valley, all the way down to Fresno, and also Reno, Nevada. So they have something like 30 locations. 75% of their abortions in 2022 were done via the abortion pill.
Right.
And again, the abortion pill, if you're just listening, is not the morning after pill. This is a drug to basically disconnect the fetus from the uterine wall, cut the baby off from the mom's food supply so the baby dies in the womb, and then you take a second drug to expel the baby. Basically, you're recreating an artificial miscarriage up to 10 weeks into a pregnancy. 10 weeks into a pregnancy, when this organism has arms, legs, fingers, toes, brain activity, and a heartbeat. Okay? Looks like a very small baby. So the number of abortions being done via the abortion pill, the percentage of abortions done via the abortion pill has increased massively since 2021, when President Biden instituted this regulation allowing the abortion pill to be shipped through the mail. And the total raw gross numbers of abortions in America have spiked since 2021 in ways that cannot be accounted for by, some people say, well, see, abortion bans don't work. See, Texas outlawed abortion after Roe v. Wade was overturned and the number of abortions in America went up. See, no, the spike in numbers is so dramatic that we're going from 800, we're going up by like 100,000 more abortions per year, more than 100,000 abortions extra per year over the numbers that we had in like 2018, 2019, 2020.
Right.
Okay, we're talking about, in those years we were at the level of 800 something thousand. We're now almost at 1 million per year. That number isn't explained by Texas making it harder to get abortions.
That would be counterintuitive.
There's no way that's it. The thing that it tracks, and the problem is that you had two very significant things happened within a year of each other. The Biden FDA allowed the abortion pill to be distributed through the mail via telemedicine visits, picked up at major pharmacies, and the next year, Roe v. Wade got overturned. So people are attributing to the overturning of Roe v. Wade, see, you stupid conservatives, you outlaw abortion and more abortions happen. No, that makes no sense. There's no reason why. And you can look at individual states like Texas that have limited abortion. The number of abortions have really dropped. Mm-hmm. The difference is in states where it is legal, it has overcompensated by a huge enough factor that it can't just be accounted for. Like, if abortion numbers had stayed stable, maybe you could try to make the argument, okay, see, abortion bans don't work. But no, another factor has come into play. There's no reason why the number of abortions would increase by about 100,000 per year in America without something causing that. And the clear thing, in my eyes, that is causing that is this regulatory change that makes getting an abortion so much easier.
Right.
So it's, and so for those of us who are pro-life, it's a disaster of truly mind-boggling, heart-wrenching, horrific proportions.
And John, I think this is very important. As pro-lifers, we obviously celebrate anytime any one single life is saved. But I think sometimes we can lose sight of the bigger picture. Sometimes.
Yeah, well, and it's the thing is, this is a difficult, the FDA's regulatory status for this drug. It's not something you can kind of explain in 5 seconds. Oh, Texas has abortion legal. Texas has abortion illegal. How does the FDA regulate this? And it's clear that it's difficult. There is bureaucratic intransigence in the FDA with regards to this. I mean, one of the things Kavanaugh noted in his opinion was it wasn't just Barack Obama's regulatory changes on the abortion pill, Joe Biden's regulatory changes on the abortion pill. In 2019, the Trump FDA approved, because, well, apparently it's just kind of an automatic thing. This is what we're told. The Trump administration approved allowing for the generic version of mifepristone to be okayed on the American market. And this is during a allegedly pro-life administration. And the argument at the time was, well, it would have been really hard to stop. This is basically automatic. And I guess I'm just tired of basically what we have are we have Republican administrations appointing people to head up the FDA and HHS for whom the life issue is just really not much of a priority.
It's kind of an annoyance that, I guess I got to try to do something to make those pro-lifers happy. They're going to complain about something probably.
And it's like, the abortion pill was approved in the year 2000 by the FDA. George W. Bush's FDA, which, by the way, the head of HHS under George W. Bush was Tommy Thompson, who was a pro-choice Republican. So the Bush administration FDA did nothing to roll back the FDA's approval of the abortion pill in the year 2000. Could Bush have appointed an FDA head who had that as a priority? He 100% could have, and he 100% did not.
Right.
So for 8 years, nothing happened. In fact, in 2002, the Bush-era FDA blocked various kinds of challenges to the legal status of the abortion pill. So a pro-life administration that is governing the FDA blocked this. Barack Obama approves all these loosening of regulations for the abortion pill in 2016. Does the Trump FDA do anything to roll it back over the course of 4 years? Nothing. Nothing for 4 years. And, in fact, approves the generic brand, the approval for generic mifepristone. Because, well, it's just kind of an autopilot and it's not really a thing you can say. Try harder. I don't know. And the idea is, well, the career employees at the FDA are just sort of intransigent and it's really hard to change. Then, then I guess nothing's going to get done. It's amazing to me, though, how for Republicans, when they get in power, the whole swath, the whole universe of regulations on businesses, tax policy, we always get a tax cut during a Republican administration. We always get regulatory slashing and stuff like that benefits businesses. And I don't care how you think one way or another about those things. I'm not saying anything one way or another. But it's very clear where the priority is and where the priority ain't. And where the priority ain't, and it's a thing of like, if you put in the effort and really try, maybe you can roll back this thing that is going to lead to hundreds of thousands of abortions. Like, frankly, like, I don't care if you introduce some human personhood regulation, executive declaration or something that isn't going to do diddly. What I care about is when you're in power and when you control things, what are you doing to actually, stop babies from being killed? And I think
we're tired of show votes is what you're saying, John.
Right. And I guess I'm frustrated that, the choice is between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And given that Donald Trump didn't do anything about this in his prior 4-year term, I mean, I guess there's a better shot that maybe something will happen if he wins. But I don't know. I guess I just have no confidence that this will be improved. And it's a crying shame that the Republican Party, this is one of the moments where I'm most cynically convinced that the Republican Party is full of people who are totally insincere about their pro-life commitments and who only use pro-lifers for their votes. All right. On that incredibly cheery note, we'll be back with more on Right to Life Radio. We got other interesting stuff about IVF that we want to discuss, the terrible Ted Cruz bill. That's next on Right to Life Radio. We're back with Right to Life Radio. On this show, we have discussed frequently over the last several weeks the topic of IVF, which for some reason has become a major thing that moron Republicans have decided to spend tons of time and energy and political capital on. Something that should have been a 2-week news cycle has been perpetuated by Ted Cruz into a months-long campaign of idiocy. Basically, the Alabama State Supreme Court said that, if you negligently kill IVF embryos, or if you're an IVF clinic, and you let someone waltz into the back of your clinic and kill IVF embryos negligently, then you can be liable for a wrongful death lawsuit. This resulted in just a firestorm of ignorant outrage from across the political spectrum. What? Roe v. Wade gets overturned and now IVF clinics are under attack. No. Negligent IVF clinics that let people destroy embryos can be liable in Alabama under Alabama's wrongful death statute, which has always been interpreted to allow people to sue for the wrongful death also of a fetus inside the womb or an embryo inside the womb. So what was a simple question of interpreting Alabama law by the Alabama State Supreme Court got blown up in, what was it, February, March that story broke, Jonathan?
Yeah.
Got blown up into this national issue. Is IVF under threat? IVF was not under threat at all. The only thing was, hey, IVF clinic, it was basically a case in Alabama where some doofus wandered into the back of an IVF clinic, grabbed some kind of receptacle that held multiple embryos in it, grabbed it. It was really cold because they keep it under deep freeze. It hurt his hand. He dropped it, and a bunch of IVF embryos were destroyed. So the parents of those embryos were understandably upset, and they wanted to file a lawsuit against the clinic for wrongful death. That somehow turned into IVF is under attack, which is the stupidest thing. Ranting and raving here, but it was incredibly stupid.
Yes.
And so it turned into Democrats had the understandably stupid attack response of, see, Republicans want to shut down IVF. They overturned Roe v. Wade, and now this is what they want. They want to shut down IVF. And Republicans, instead of just writing out what should have been a 2-week-long news story and saying, no one's attacking IVF. IVF clinics should practice due diligence and not let random yahoos waltz in. If that's how Alabama's wrongful death statute regulates things, then that's fine. Instead, Republicans in Alabama and nationwide went on this tour of self-flagellation to declare, no, IVF is the most sacred and important thing that must be protected at all costs, and let's completely ignore all the very serious moral issues involved with IVF, chiefly the wastage rate of creating far more embryos than will ever be implanted and actually grow to term. So the destruction of hundreds of thousands of embryos in this process every year. So Ted Cruz and Katie Britt, who's the senator from Alabama, and Ted Cruz, U.S. senator from Texas, have introduced a bill. All these Republicans so skittish about, well, should we ever introduce any nationwide legislation to restrict abortion? Not sure if Congress has the right to do that under a strict, federalist conception of what Congress's authority is. Does it have the authority to, under interstate commerce, to regulate abortion, a massive nationwide industry in healthcare practice? No, seems very difficult. The Ninth Amendment, 10th Amendment, blah 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 blah. But apparently, it is Congress's job to vindicate a nationwide federal right to get IVF. And that is what Ted Cruz, the convenient constitutionalist, the convenient federalist, Ted Cruz, has apparently decided. So he's introduced this bill to give massive nationwide protections, funding, whatever, for IVF. Now, Jonathan, you have pointed out that there is a dueling bill to this that is hopefully going to get introduced that basically, hopefully this will gain more steam than the Ted Cruz bill, but maybe you can explain kind of what's going on here.
Yeah, so I think, John, one thing that has been very frustrating for a lot of conservatives, as you just ranted and mentioned, is that there has been this laser-like focus on IVF because Republicans they're so desperate in the wake of the Dobbs decision to say, oh my gosh, we got to do anything we can to avoid getting tagged or targeted as being anti-woman or anti-family.
Yeah.
And there's just this complete paranoia that this is going to result in bad electoral outcomes for us in November.
Right.
And, well, no, we can't have this happen. Yeah. What do we do? How do we quickly get out in front of the story and make it seem...
But again, you'd think that this would be like a 2-week-long news cycle if they just shut up about it and ignored it. But no, they've perpetuated it.
Right. They keep bringing it up and introducing it. And we talked about it, I think, on one of our previous shows, the just absolute banger of a statement from Patty Murray in Washington State.
Well, let's give that more air because I feel like you talked about it last week, but it was like at the very end of the show. Yeah, so Patty Murray, the pro-abortion Democrat senator from Washington?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, she basically said, I've got to see if I here she said, and this is a fact sheet from Patty Murray in the debate over all these bills, because at the same time, the thing that's amazing to me, on the one hand, Republicans are trying to introduce this bill that is saying, no, we love IVF. No one disagrees with IVF. We all support it. And at the same time, there is a bill from Tammy Duckworth, who is a senator from, I believe, Illinois, if I'm remembering right.
Democrat senator from Illinois.
She has introduced a bill on IVF, saying, "Oh yeah, we need to protect IVF, and here's what we're going to do." And basically, it is something that encompasses a lot of abortion legislation language as well.
Yeah,
and this is the line. These are some of the lines that she says here. The Republicans are getting the worst of both worlds. They're basically having, on the one hand, they're not going to get credit for supporting the Democrats' bill, which is what the Democrats are using to message and beat up on Republicans. Yeah. And they're also not holding a consistent pro-life position, on the other hand, and which is making people like us upset.
Yeah. So they're making nobody happy.
Correct.
Yeah.
So this is essentially part of the line from this is Senator Patty Murray's website. This is her official press release, and I'm going to read just a couple of little quotes here to point out that as much as we hate the outcome that she is getting to, Patty Murray is 100% correct in terms of being intellectually consistent.
Right.
So this is what Senator Patty Murray said. She says, Senator Murray made clear that Republicans cannot have it both ways, claiming to support IVF while at the same time supporting fetal personhood. An extremist ideology that says an embryo should have the exact same rights as a living, breathing human being and is fundamentally incompatible with IVF. So that is what Patty Murray says. Now, we would disagree that it's an extremist ideology that says an embryo is morally and philosophically the same as a living, breathing human being. Right. But then this is what she says in her speech. I'll read just a little bit of it here on my best angry, indignant Karen senator voice. I'm not going to mince words here. It's ridiculous to claim this bill protects IVF when it does nothing of the sort, Senator Murray said on the Senate floor. In fact, it explicitly allows states to restrict IVF in all sorts of ways. It's literally in the bill text. Remember, it didn't take state lawmakers in Alabama passing a ban on IVF clinics for the state to suspend services. Murray continued, even though it's an inherent part of the IVF process for families that will to make more embryos than they will need, this bill does nothing, not a single thing, to ensure families who use IVF can have their clinics dispose of unused embryos without facing legal threats for a standard medical procedure. So in her mind, she is explicitly saying the quiet part out loud, and she is saying, hey, inherent to the entire process of IVF, she says it is an inherent part of the IVF process that, number one, families will make more embryos than they need. Okay.
Which, by the way, I'm not sure that it is, because there are countries that regulate this.
There are some, but she is essentially saying
but that's what she's saying. Anyway,
she's essentially saying no, as it's practiced in America, at least currently, you always got to create more embryos than you need. Number one, and then number two, clinics should be able to dispose of unused embryos without facing legal threats.
Which I don't think even clinics in Alabama were exposed to that.
Right.
Like, it wasn't a question of embryos that the parents didn't want. It was embryos the parents wanted, and the clinic negligently let some guy walk in and destroy a bunch of embryos.
But the real line, John, this is the closing line that I shared last time, but as you said, I think it deserves more notice. She said, quote, "The stone-cold reality is that you cannot protect IVF and champion fetal personhood."
Bingo. You can't champion IVF and also champion fetal personhood. And Patty Murray is, again, she's a pro-choice Democrat, liberal senator from Washington. She's 100% correct. She's at least consistent. She doesn't think embryos in the womb need to be protected. She doesn't think embryos in a test tube need to be protected.
Yep.
Doesn't think they have moral personhood. Doesn't think they need protection in law. Okay, I think that's a totally wrong position. I think it's totally monstrous. But at least she's consistent.
And John,
I think the whole Republican Party, almost every elected Republican who has spoken of this, of whom I am aware, has taken a fundamentally illogical position.
And
They are saying that human beings in wombs have value and human beings in test tubes don't.
And there's this famous phrase, John, in politics and in life that is, when people tell you who they are, believe them. Well, let me read for you as part of this press release also. It says, here's what Barbara Kalura, president and CEO of Resolve, the National Infertility Association, said about the Republicans' IVF bill. So this is the compromise position that Republicans are trying to have. They're trying to have their cake and eat it too. But this is what the president of the National Infertility Association said. The bill allows for states to push regulations that could severely reduce the standard of care for IVF treatment, such as restrictions on how many embryos are created and what individuals can do with these embryos. And here, John, this is the key point. Tell me if this language sounds familiar. Decisions that should only be made between patients and their doctors based on science and clinical guidelines.
Based on science. As if there's nothing about ethics that's involved in any of this. Science has...
And John, but look, IVF and what you do with your extra embryos, that's a decision for patients and their doctors. It's too big for the government to get involved.
This idea that Democrats with their selective ideas about when the government, all of a sudden, total libertarians, the Democrat Party, when it comes to just specifically the moral question of whether or not human organisms have value. We'll talk about that a little bit more after the break. This is Right to Life Radio, with all of us at Right to Life of Central California, rtlcc.org. We're back with Right to Life Radio. We're talking about the efforts to pass some kind of legislation about IVF. Democrats have their legislation, horrible. Republicans, led by Ted Cruz and Katie Britt, have their legislation, also pretty horrible. There's a third piece of legislation that's floating out there. Basically, James Langford and Cindy Hyde-Smith and Chuck Grassley introduced this bill called the Restore Act, which would point more federal resources towards promoting research on leading causes of infertility. So try to address infertility itself. This is one of the critiques of IVF beyond the main critique of it involves the destruction of a whole bunch of embryos, basically the creation of more embryos that can ever be implanted or survive, and their destruction. One of the other big criticisms of IVF is that it is not, properly speaking, healthcare. It is not actually fixing something that's wrong with the man or the woman's body. It's not actually fixing an infertility issue. And in fact, often IVF is now being used by gay couples to allow them to have children where nobody might have anything wrong with their infertility. This is just a treatment to sort of bypass the normal method of bringing children into the world. So properly speaking, it's not really healthcare. And that's actually, I think, often one of the cruel aspects of this for couples who are facing infertility issues is that this incredibly expensive thing that isn't actually fixing their health problems is offered as, this is what you do. So this bill by, Chuck Grassley from Iowa, Cindy Hyde-Smith of Mississippi, and James Langford from Oklahoma have introduced this legislation to focus federal resources toward promoting research on the leading causes of infertility while making information on possible treatments more readily available to the women and men struggling with fertility problems. So actually try to address the problems of infertility.
Right.
But again, I just think this whole IVF conversation has become a massive flail and extending what should have been a 2-week-long news cycle into, we're on month 4 now. That'll do it for Right to Life Radio. We will see you all next time. Thank you so much for listening.